Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to Breaking the Silence. I'm Renee.
And I'm Kelly.
Last week, we started talking about grief and how it reshapes attachment and how healing does not follow a timeline. And today, we're going to be taking it a step further because honestly, grieving is one thing. But grieving while raising kids, that is another layer entirely.
And I don't think we talk about how complex that is, just a whole other layer.
Yeah, we definitely don't. When you're parenting after loss, there's like this silent pressure to be quite honest, like that you feel like you have to hold it all together. And you don't just carry your grief, you carry theirs too. And sometimes you don't even know which emotion belongs to who?
And you're still supposed to pack lunches, sign permission slips, show up to the games.
And there's no pause button on motherhood. When your heart's shattered, you don't get to just say, "All right, time out. I need some time," you know? You you still have to show up and do the things. And I remember one night not long after Dave passed, the kids were gone with friends of ours and the house was completely quiet. And I just sat on the living room floor sobbing as I thought, I don't know how to do this. Not just grief again, but motherhood alone.
Mhm.
I wasn't just missing Dave, I was missing the co-parent, the backup person, the person
Mhm.
who would say, "We've got this." And the next morning, all the things still had to happen. Lunches still had to be made. I had to make sure the kids were up and ready and drop them off to school. And I think that's what people don't see. Grief doesn't remove responsibility, it amplifies it. And loss can also shift how we attach to our kids. And I think that's important that we talk about this too, the attachment piece of it, because some moms become hyper vigilant. They're overprotective, always scanning for danger, and others pull inward emotionally because it feels too overwhelming to hold that much pain. And I want to make this clear, like, neither response makes you a bad parent. It means your nervous system experienced trauma.
And don't you kind of think too, maybe that's not, I don't know if I want to say grief, but guilt. So on top of the grief that you're feeling, you also feel like guilt if you don't show up for your kids or just trying to show up in the right way or just that fear piece.
Yeah, actually, we're going to talk about guilt here in a little bit. But yeah, the fear piece, after you lose someone, your brain doesn't just grieve the past, it anticipates the future. It starts thinking things like, what if something happens to them too? Or what if I can't survive another loss? And I know I have experienced that where I've caught myself like in that fear piece of like, what if something happens to another one of my kids? Or what if something happens to someone? And, all those things. And yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced that. And so that fear can do one of two things. It can make you either cling tighter or emotionally distance to protect yourself.
And don't you
And
think, as well as you fearing, your children also fear losing you?
Oh,
Because
I'm
I think you
sure.
experience that. Like,
I'm sure.
yeah.
I mean, I can for sure see that in some of my kids that they are hyper vigilant now,
Mhm.
and sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Yes, the whole fear piece for them too. So to go back to what you mentioned about the guilt piece, like, yes, there is absolutely then guilt. And I think even you can feel like you're being judged, So, like, not only do we guilt ourselves for laughing again or having a good day or guilt for not having enough emotional energy sometimes, I think we can also wonder, like, are people judging me? Like, I can remember the first time I finally went to a football game after Bryant had
Mhm.
passed, feeling really sort of exposed and
Mhm.
like judged. Like, are people like looking at me like, you just don't know how to be quite honest. Like, am I too sad that people are like, "Oh my gosh, get over it already?" Or am I
Mhm.
trying to, like, live again and have fun and be there for my kids to experience their things, and people are like, "You look like you're way too happy for someone that lost a kid," you know? Like, you really, in some ways, just aren't sure how you're supposed to be. But here is the truth. Your children do not need a perfect parent. They need a present one, and presence doesn't mean you're never sad. It means you're honest.
And I think there's something just really powerful about kids seeing grief handled honestly, because
Yes,
we try
definitely.
to protect them from that piece of it. And then I also think if you try to hide that so much and not expose that to them, then they don't know how to. I think they maybe feel guilty themselves for not being as strong. They kind of see like this false sense. So I think it is important, as hard as it is, to let them see that. Maybe just in layers or just a little bit, just to see that authentic side so they also know they have, for lack of better words, permission to feel that as well.
Absolutely, because I think that is, well, that is where then they feel like, wow, I've got these really big emotions. Why am I the
Mhm.
only one with these really big emotions? Like, what's wrong with me? Everybody else looks like they've got it all together, right? And so that's where avoidance can start. Like, then we are pushing it down because, well, everybody else seems okay. Nobody's like grieving and feeling all these really big things. And then we push
Mhm.
it down. And yeah, that's where avoidance begins because we don't feel like we can express it.
Right.
So I think that when you let them see you cry and you still function, or when you say things like, Mommy feels really sad today, but I'm okay. You are teaching them emotional regulation. You're teaching them resilience. Like, you're teaching them, yes, I can feel this and I will be okay. So you're teaching them that emotions don't mean we're unsafe,
Mhm.
that we can feel our emotions and still be okay.
Right.
Like, I think sometimes we think that our emotions are going to swallow us whole. And so you're teaching them that their emotions aren't going to swallow them whole. The emotion will pass. It's like a wave, It comes, and yes, it you might sob for a minute or whatever, or a few or 15 minutes or whatever, but it doesn't last forever.
Right.
It does pass, it does subside, the wave does go back in, the tide goes in, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's important and that helps them so much. I also want to talk about if you're walking this with faith, there's another layer there too,
Mhm.
You're trying to model trust in God while you're still wrestling with your own questions. And that tension is holy ground. Your children do not need a theology lecture here. They need to see that faith can coexist with grief. And I
Mhm.
say that with so much compassion, even for myself, because I look back and I'm like, man, did I do that to my kids? And with, again, with so much compassion and grace, because I think I tried to always point them to Jesus and that he was still good and faithful. But yeah,
Mhm.
looking back, gosh, did I just sit with them and let them know that they could? I mean, I think I did in some way because I
Mhm.
told my kids, like, I wrestled, you know, but I wonder sometimes too if I did it enough. So that's where we just trust that God fills in the gaps of what we,
Right.
did or didn't do. But so I think that if I guess I want to say all that to encourage you too that if you're parenting after loss and thinking, I'm messing this up or I'm too emotional, let or maybe even I'm not strong enough, whatever it is that you're telling yourself, let me say this to you so gently. You are doing something so incredibly hard, and you're doing it with love. And that matters more than perfection ever will. And so to sort of circle back a little bit to what I just said about with myself of thinking like when, I would be talking with my kids, I'm wondering like, gosh, did I give them like a theology lesson? Like,
Right.
it's okay that I didn't do it perfect, you know? What matters is that I was doing it with love and I still was present and I still showed up for them.
Right.
And like I said, then God fills in the gaps, because we aren't
Mhm.
perfect. Next week, we're going somewhere even like really more tender than this. We are going to talk about faith, when your faith in God, when you pray, sorry, let me back it up. When you
Mhm.
pray and God doesn't answer the way you prayed. So,
Yeah. So that one's going to be really deep. But in saying
it,
that, it's so funny. Like, just I think our testimonies, the longer you live, and I just had a season of that. I just had something that came to pass, and it's so hard. But then you will realize that even when He doesn't answer the way you prayed, you know that it's because God has something better for you. And it's so hard to believe that in the midst of what's going on, especially if it's something you feel like you wanted so badly. But again, the longer you live, the longer you trust, the more faith you have, you will realize it's so true. Every door
mhm.
that was closed, when that one finally opens, you're just like, that was really hard to get here, but yeah, he answered the right prayer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's so important to remember that. And I think that even though it is going to be deep, it is necessary for us to talk about it because I think that that is a very real thing of your faith, what your faith looks like when God doesn't answer the way you prayed,
Right.
And that's a very real, real place to be. So, do you have anything else you want to add, Kelly, before we wrap this up?
I guess just that God does. I just think back to, and I've talked about my divorce before. That was a huge turning point for me. And it's so funny because even though it was so hard in the midst of it, that is when I grew the closest to God. That is when my faith really got strong, which I guess is kind of ironic. Some people really run from God or they're mad at God. And I just thanked God because I was like, you have saved me from a situation I couldn't have saved myself from.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely, and I think that's where we get to decide, like, because we're all gonna go through really hard things in life. Like, if you're not walking through something hard right now, you either already have or you're going to. It's just part of life, and we get to choose. Like, is this gonna make me bitter, or is this gonna make me better? Is this
right.
gonna draw me closer to God, or am I gonna rebel against God and be angry
Hmm.
and, pull back. And so, yeah, we'll get into that even next week too. So, Until next week, we send you off with so much love.